debate on vote number 6, International Relations and Cooperation Appropriation Bill.
Thank you. Let's invite the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation.
Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Deputy Ministers Mfeketo and Landers, Honorable Minister Kwele, Honorable Members of Parliament, Your Excellencies, Ambassadors, High Commissioners, representatives of international organizations, our own South African International Relations Council, SAQA, distinguished guests, our children who are our VVIP today, Dumelang. It is an honor to present this year's budget vote of our department, DICO, in the year of Oliver Reginald Tambo. We also have an honor to be addressing you at this time, just a few minutes after our president led by example and addressed a gathering in Pretoria on this very, very important matter. Hoye Africa, hoye. This year, 2017, the year of O.R. Tambo, one of the most outstanding leaders of our liberation struggle. I say our liberation struggle because it is my liberation, it is your liberation, because African National Congress, it's an undisputed leader of the liberation movement on the continent that is 105 years old. So this freedom we celebrate belongs to you and me. This history is our history. It's not of a particular grouping. It is of the Africa we want. During 2017 State of the Nation address, our President, His Excellency Jacob Zuma, reflected on O.R. Tambo's role, as he did again this morning, and I quote our President referring to the work of Oliver Reginald Tambo, and I quote, "We seek to live in peace with our neighbors and the peoples of the world in conditions of equality, mutual respect, and equal advantage," close quote. That was at the MPLR Congress in 1977. But in 1981, again coincidentally in Luanda, our forebearer, O.R. Tambo, said, when South Africa and Namibia become free, the place of an African woman would no longer be in the kitchen, because women have always been part and part of the struggle for freedom, but the place of the woman in a free South Africa will be where she wants to be. Luckily, we are still mothers. We are mothers. That you can't take away from us, because we are the only ones who know how labor pains go and have the honor. We can be ambassadors, we can be in business, we can be grandmothers, and indeed we can be wherever else we want to be, and also lead here. So when you give women access, it is because you are acknowledging their role. You're not giving them because you found them there. Because we've never been passive participants, we've always been there. I know that seated in this room, Honorable Minister and Deputy Ministers, many mothers here and grandmothers and like me and others are also worried about who's fetching the child at school, what's for dinner and so on. But let's save that for another day, Honorable Chair. What did OR represent? Together with Mama Adelaide Tambo, diplomacy of Ubuntu. I am because you are. Patriotism, loyalty, dedication, equity, and integrity. Simply put, Batu Bailey. So, paying tribute to this giant, we should continue paying tribute to him in action, trying to emulate the good things he did. Together, like I said, with Mama Adelaide. This reminds me of what one of our most successful former AU chairs of the Commission, who happens to be the first woman to don this position as an African woman, Dr. Nkoana-Mashabane Zuma, said about OR, and I quote, Oliver Tambo, like Moses, had been to the mountaintop and had seen the promised land, yet never lived to see the freedom of his people. Nonetheless, we shall continue to draw inspiration from his teachings, his commitment, and his dedication in the service of the people of our country, building in the dream of the promised land for which he dedicated his entire life, close quote. We've taken a conscious decision to celebrate Africa Day the way we are doing. We started with a breakfast with all our stakeholders in a live telecast get-together, followed by, as a precursor for our president hosting lunch for guests from all over, including my hometown, Seshego, girl children, because we are not celebrating the Africa of the others. We are an integral part of this continent. We are Africans. As on the eve of Ghana's independence that has just turned 60 years this year, our own Ghanaian Nkrumah said, and I quote, "The independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked up to the total liberation of the entire Africa," close quote. Today, all Africa is free, yes, but the people of Western Sahara still need to be heard and to be listened to. And we take this opportunity to urge the United Nations to complete its work. We are doing our part as the African Union, but we also urge the international community to make sure that that which they yearn for also lives. This year also, we commemorate the 50 years of illegal occupation of Palestinian territories. The last time I checked, that which was 1967 and owned by Palestinians was now reduced to less than 2% of that which they thought belonged to them. So I'm sure the honorables will be doing the honorable and checking on this. Honorable members, Our foreign policy is guided by our own apex priorities, led or informed by our National Development Plan. In it, there's Chapter 7 of the NDP that envisions an active role for South Africa in the region, the continent, and the world. We therefore seek to build strategic partnerships for development to advance our national interests and promote the enduring values that define our nation, namely democracy, human rights, and good governance in line with Ubuntu. I am because we are. That's why we change our name from Foreign Affairs to International Relations and Cooperation, because we always prioritize cooperation and collaboration against abrasive competition that does not help no one. So for us, regional economic and political integration of our continent is not a nice to have. It is a true form of radical socio-economic transformation, not only for South Africans, but for the Africa we want. We will not look back. We will not blink. We will continue sustaining our South-South partnership and solidarity that's mutually beneficial, and continue our dialogue with the countries of the North. We are conscious that this can be fully advanced within a reformed, just, and equitable global system of governance. Remember 1945? That was more than 70 years ago. So the more things change, the more they remain the same somewhat. So, where we can make a contribution, like when we were chairing the G77 plus China, we championed the conclusion of a very inclusive and unanimously adopted sustainable development goals that were transforming us or moving us from the MDGs to the SDGs. But if you check these two documents, our NDP and the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, and check our Agenda 2063 of the Africa we want and the 7 aspirations, very much in line. Because our forebears decolonized us, but we need economic emancipation. When people ask, what's so unique about South Africa? My response, Your Honorables and Excellencies, is we complained and fought for a colonization of a special type. But our constitution said we are a rainbow nation, we are a tapestry that we are today, because black and white, we have a place called home, and this is South Africa. But that should be that it's not a nice to have, but a must have, so that the 90% of the population that do not remain spectators of what is happening economically on the continent, and in particular here in South Africa. And say it loud that we are not an African outpost for Europe or whoever in our continent. As we are gathered here, integration of our economy, first changing the structural form of our economy, the educational system that teaches my son less. My last born is 17 years old. He comes back home every day complaining about the history. That he says very little about the things I tell him at home. and what they get taught at school. Let's tell our children the truth. So, that which I call not a nice to have is, in 1994, trade between South Africa and the rest of our continent was 11 billion. But as at December 2016, trade between ourselves as Africans, but in particular between South Africa and the rest of our continent, stood at a staggering 436 billion rand. So, exports of processed, beneficiated goods from 2015 to 2016 grew up by almost another 5%. We want to industrialize the rest of the continent. We want to invest in our young people, the best resource we have, our people, because we are a youthful nation. We need to educate job providers, not job seekers, so that we go back to the land and beneficiate so that we export surplus of agricultural goods to the rest of the continent, working together, but also to the real overseas. There are some places where you go to where they say they have a problem of food security. They actually are deserts, so they don't even have a plan, even if they want to produce food. We can. We really have to work, and I'm sure Minister Davies had said this, to reverse this very anomaly of becoming a net importer of food when we can become a net exporter of surplus food because we will have fed our people. To the European Union and to our other partners in the North, we continue to appreciate the program of the MIP, which contributes or has contributed since 1994 more than 76 billion rands to our developmental program. This is also not a nice to have. It is in their interest as it is in our interest. We continue to appreciate the continuation of the partnership or cooperation we have in or within or through the Americans on AGOA. The expansion of business and technological networks continue to mutually benefit our countries. We want to urge countries from the developed North that indeed Africans don't want the fourth industrialization zoom past them, that of ICT and digitization. Honorable Minister Twele, it's in our interest that this time around we become full participants. During our 2016 budget vote speech, we indicated to this August House that our future is inextricably linked with our own region, SADC. From August, we will become the chair of SADC. We didn't ask for it. We were requested to take over. That's in August. In September, the Honorable Minister Wang Yi of China will be handing over the reins to us on the parallels of the UN General Assembly for us to start preparing for the 10th anniversary of BRICS. Remember that the conceptual note for the formation of BRICS Development Bank was in this country in 2013. Leaders in the World Bank and IMF admit that they've never seen such a formidable determination to succeed like this one. We are proudly saying to you, by the time they come back here, that building which we've identified and we've gone through all the processes will be ready for the Africa Regional Center. Not only ready, it will be fully functional, starting this month of June. In October, we'll be officially being handed over the reins, which we didn't ask for, but was done unanimously. The Indian Ocean Rim Association chair. For us, this three weaves a thread of the Africa we want and how we will not be passive participants of how we change and transform the socio-economic well-being of our people. So goes with the implementation of SADC, COMESA, EAC Free Trade Agreement. So goes with the Continental Free Trade Agreement that we had signed. We are aware, honorable members, that peace, security, and development are two sides of the same coin. There will be no peace and security if there's no development, and vice versa. So yes, we are not only concerned, but we contribute where we can to the well-being of South Sudan, of Burundi, of the DRC, Mali, Libya, Somalia. We are encouraged by some positive developments in the Central African Republic, Lesotho, the only country that is inside another country, and the Greater Sahel and Great Lakes. So post-conflict and reconstruction and development initiatives, it's a matter that we will remain seized with because we know how to be second-class citizens in one's country. We didn't read about it, we experienced it. So even if we're called names sometimes, we continue holding on the baton of facilitation for peace and security like we do in Lesotho and in South Sudan, so that indeed we continue to do that which you said, or that which OR instructed us, not only in writing, but by doing for more than 30 years. We are delighted, honorable members. You know, Africans, I keep saying to my relatives, Africans like celebrating people when they are dead. But when they're alive, they spend very little time. That's why funeral programs, you have speaker number 17, because this is what we should have said when people were alive. Can we heartily, genuinely say we are delighted to welcome back our very own Dr. Nkoana-Mashabane Zuma after a successful conclusion of her tour of duty, where she even got 6 extra months, which we didn't ask for. We are delighted of the achievements that she got, not alone, but with all other commissioners, till where we are seated today. Because she came back home waving that which we all have, a document of the Africa we want, our own African blueprint as to what do we do with ourselves from 1963 to 2063 and the 7 aspirations that I referred to. I'm also delighted to say to you honorable members, one of the achievements of the last summit
Honorable
was
Minister,
to
you are left with 1 minute to round up.
officially come back with a decision that puts Pan-African Women's Organization as an organ of the AU. And it is based here in South Africa. So our youth are not a bulge and a problem, but harnessing the demographic dividends, it's the fact that we are the Africa that is rising, and our youthful population is our future. We are celebrating the Africa we want that is on the march, positively moving forward. Have a wonderful Africa Day.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The Honorable Masango, take the podium.
Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Ministers Nkoana-Mashabane and Kwele, present here, Honorable Deputy Ministers Mfegeto and Lenders, Excellencies, distinguished guests in the gallery, fellow South Africans, Honorable Minister, Honorable Chairperson and members, this Vote 6 debate takes place appropriately on Africa Day, the year of O.R. Tambo building a better Africa and a better future, and a better world. Honorable Minister, the committee would like to applaud you for hosting a successful Africa Day dialogue at the Westin Hotel this morning. Thank you very much. As articulated in the vision of Pan-Africanism and by Agenda 2063, the Africa must gravitate towards self-sufficiency and gradually wean itself from donor dependency, which ultimately undermines its sovereignty and the national interest of its states. That imposes an imperative to build and train our own Afrocrats and African volunteer corps to deploy in various organs of the AU, the Pan-African Parliament, and SADC, etc. Former President of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo, and co-authors Making Africa Work in this book, a handbook for economic success, not only highlights the current weaknesses and challenges afflicting the continent, but alerts us to the dangers that could settle us by 2050 if the demographic dividend, industrialization, mechanization of agriculture, etc., are not expeditiously attended to. This handbook should be read together with the Kigali report as adopted by the African Union Summit of Heads of State and Government, adopted on the 29th January 2017. It is extremely disheartening that a prominent South African praises colonialism as enslavement, the land seizure from the natives of 1913, the oppression of the African people, the denial of their inalienable human rights, and their impoverishment as something that was not bad. What a shame. What an insult to the memory of O.R. Tambo, Nelson Mandela, and Kwame Nkrumah, who fought against the excesses of colonialism. Yet the victims of apartheid colonialism of over 342 years slavishly and sheepishly follow her and her self-serving paternalistic party of, to quote Nelson Mandela at the COSATU rally in December 2000, at the party of white bosses and black stooges, unquote. O.R. Tambo's stoic soldierly physique was not just home to an incisive intellect, foresightedness, valor, and progressive internationalism, but it also enabled him to provide a unifying stewardship to the ANC from 1967 to 1991. Tambo eloquently posited, I quote, "What I condemn with the vehemence I can master is the fact that for 3/4 of a century, we have been victims of white minority rule, which has progressively become more violent against us, up to the point where it assumes the forms we are witnessing," unquote. Sihlalo, nendlwebethamthetho Gazi kuyathuwisa ukukhumbula bonyana abantu bePalestina bathathelwa inarha njengathi. Batlhagiswa, bayamanywa, bayadusulwa, begodi bayabotshwa, abanye batutshulwe ngesigidi nabangongoyila njengathi ngaphambi ko-1994. Sihlalo, njenganje ampuri isigidi namakhulu amathathu wembotshwa zombanganarha zingale ukudla ngombana zifuna kususwe ukuhlaliswa wedwa ngesikhuwa solitary confinement. Nokubotshwa ungachuchiswa administrative detention. Nokufuna bonyana imindeni yabo ivunyelwe ukubavakatshela ejele. We applaud the Friends of Palestine, the BDS, and other prominent South Africans for conducting a fasting initiative for 2 days in solidarity with the hashtag Palestinian political prisoners mass hunger strike undertaken since the 17th of April this year. The ANC hopes that President Trump's visit to the Middle East this week will possibly persuade the Israeli government to meet the hashtag Palestinian political prisoners demands and give an impetus to the negotiated two-state settlement. Honorable members, in 2015, we applauded the rapprochement between Cuba and the USA, the detente policy, and we vainly hoped that the economic blockade would be expeditiously lifted. Washington continues to ban exports to Cuba of products and equipment important to key sectors of the economy, whilst the embargo prevents Cuba from freely exporting products and services to the USA. For instance, Cuba cannot have direct banking relations with the USA. This embargo is unjust, is flagrant, and is a violation of the human rights of the Cuban people, and the Guantanamo Bay has not yet been returned. Therefore, working with the Friends of Cuba, the mobilization of the international community and other solidarity campaigns is necessary to help expose this extraterritorial act of aggression and blockade and condemn it and blockade as condemned by the United Nations General Assembly. Fellow compatriots, on the 15th March 2017, our Parliament, together with the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, hosted a public lecture on Western Sahara, wherein various stakeholders, including Ambassador of Sahrawi Democratic Republic, the Friends of Western Sahara, and others, made their demand abundantly clear about the urgent decolonization and independence of Western Sahara. The AU must not concede on this demand. As envisioned by the NDP Vision 2030, the committee commends the Department for leading South Africa astutely through unpredictable, unstable, and sometimes troubled international waters in the United Nations, the G20, the G77 plus China, the WTO, the World Economic Forum, and FOCAC. South Africa champions our trade and economic national interest within this environment. Honorable Minister, we need a radical, no-holds-barred frontal approach to the WTO and the WEF to tilt the balance of trade in favor of the African continent. Olusegun Obasanjo also stresses the importance of improving the intra-African trade in his book. On our chairperson, the committee notes with appreciation that our country has a vast diplomatic footprint internationally. Let's utilize this to leverage more trade with Britain, notwithstanding their recent Brexit, AGOA, notwithstanding the posture of the Trump administration, and the historical trade with the European Union, for instance, the EPAS. The committee was encouraged by the department's commitment and resolved to achieve its strategic objectives this financial year, albeit with a budget reduced by 207.2 million. However, attending to the qualified audit outcomes should be the department's priority, including the implementation of the cost containment measures agreed to with National Treasury. Alternative funding in order to cap the cost of leasing properties abroad, including the provision of a permanent headquarters for the Pan-African Parliament, should also be attended to by the department, as well as attending to and updating the asset register. Honorable Chairperson and members, the Foreign Service Bill is before the committee. In January this year, we conducted a successful public seminar on the bill at the department's offices. Currently, we are engaging with various departments to hear their views, suggestions, commitments, and objections on the bill, and will shortly be undertaking a study tour to Germany. Honourable Minister, the committee was satisfied that in this financial year, the ARF would be utilized to support democracy and good governance in the continent, capacity building, training programs, humanitarian and disaster interventions where it might be required. Noteworthy is that the post-conflict reconstruction and development will benefit from the fund if the need arises. However, Minister, the ARF must still pursue its goal of migrating to SADPA. One of the recommendations of the committee has made to the department was that public diplomacy needs to be intensified and deepened so that the entire civil society can know, support, and appreciate the sterling work being done by our various departments in the continent, such as peace brokering and peacekeeping. The South African Council on International Relations, SACWA, and our committee should also play a meaningful role to achieve the foregoing recommendation. In July 2015, the National General Council took a resolution that South Africa should withdraw its membership of the ICC in view of its perceived selective prosecution of heads of state and government in the continent and East Europe, labeling it as a colonial court or an instrument used for global power of control to effect regime change. However, the NGC was resolute that war crimes, genocide, and crimes against humanity and impunity must be dealt with in the national courts as well as the African Court of Justice and Human Rights when all due processes in the AU are met to operationalize it.